So again, now that I started recording, welcome to lecture 4 of Business Technology and Innovation. Today we're talking about the business model and the business model canvas, in which we link the innovation to doing business. So we link the innovations we talked about in lecture 1 and 2 to the parts of your organization that you need to organize in order to make the innovation a success. But before that, please let me remind you that, find the slide. Next week, of course, is a lecture, but also next week there are the work group sessions, and you have to present the first part of your business plan, and the whole innovation part. There's the details of what should be in there in the presentation is in the description of the business plan. But please remember that the group that you're in determines when you have a work group session. So for example, group 7 to 12 have a work group session on Wednesday from 10:30 to 12:30. And again, the work groups start at exactly 10:30. So maybe we have to wait a few minutes until the room is clear, so if there's a work group before us. But we start as soon as possible because we need the time. Also, it would be helpful if you would make sure that your presentation is up and ready to go. So no endlessly trying to log on into Gmail to start your presentation or whatever. Just have your presentation ready on a laptop or on a USB drive or another way of easily finding the presentation so that there's enough time for the actual presentation. So that's one. The next thing is that there was a press conference last week, of course, and there it was decided that that we can do offline teaching again as usual. So it was usual 1.5 years ago, which basically means that we can start teaching full capacity again, starting, it was September 25. Only we start after the autumn break, because our first 7 lectures have been planned online. We don't have a room, and I'm not sure at all if I can even schedule a room, and I'm pretty sure there's no time left to schedule recording, to arrange recording of the lectures. So administratively, it's far handier to keep doing it online, and then the second part, final 7 lectures, will be offline, but they will be streamed online, and they will be recorded as well. So I think that's great news, and also because I'm very much looking forward to actually seeing students again. And of course, I will see some of you next week, but seeing you in a lecture would be great. Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, I also asked it to the schedulers, but they said that planning-wise, it was very difficult to have the same time the whole semester. I did not really understand why, because this lecture is online, so it might as well be on Wednesday. But well, yes, here we are. For the second part of the semester, the room is booked on Wednesday at 2:45, and there's not much that I can do anymore to change that. So it had a reason, but not a good reason. At least I think. I think it's very confusing to have 2 different times for during the semester. So I'm sorry about that. It's not of my choosing. So for those of you who want to take the lecture online, I hope many of you will. Online, you can do the lecture online starting halfway October or so. Please make sure you're vaccinated or tested beforehand. No, that would be great. So let's start the lecture. So today we were talking about business models and the business model canvas. So we already talked a bit about, we talked a bit about invention is what makes an invention innovation, that the difference between invention and innovation has kind of value. Last week we talked about, okay, if the innovation, how will the innovation diffuse? So if the innovation stays within the, how does the innovation goes from inside of the organization to outside of the organization, then transferred throughout the market. And today we're going to talk about, okay, how do you need to organize your organization, and how do you need to think about the way your innovation fits in the organization in order to make the innovation a success. And we do that bit by talking about business models and business model companies. So let's first talk about business models. So what is a business model? Well, there are a lot of different definitions, but in general, a business model is how an organization creates value and profits from that what creates value. And profits, again, I said it a couple of times before, profit does not mean that every innovation needs to be like a for-profit organization, but you can also define profit in terms of, how many people are exposed to a health message, how many people quit smoking after a new innovative campaign, something like that. That can also be how you define profit for your organization. So in general, a business model relates to how an organization creates value. And business models, you often find the term business model in managerial jargon, so because it's a cool term, we have to have a good business model, but there is something to it. So it has some useful properties, the term, because it links your idea innovation to the organization and the market. So it's the link between the innovation and how the innovation is useful. So basically the link between an invention and the innovation part. So there are some formal definitions, the capabilities and resources required to create market and deliver value and to generate revenue streams. Business model is the logic data, etc., that supports the value proposition for the customer and a viable structure of revenues and costs for the enterprise, delivering that value. And the third one is a business model describes the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. So if you look at all these definitions, you see two main components. So it's value in terms of, okay, what does it deliver to the ones adopting the innovation? Well, maybe three components. So the value, what does it deliver to the ones adopting the innovation? Second component is how does it benefit us or the organization? And the third one is what do we need? What do we need in our organization to make sure this innovation, to be sure that we can manage and can come up with the correct word, do this innovation. So basically, a business model relates to the innovation itself. It relates to the organization. So how do we organize to make it internally to make it a success? It relates to the value of the innovation. So what do the people want? And it relates to how you benefit from the innovation, so cost and revenue. So if you look at this definition is three components, but because we're talking about innovation, you can basically define a business model in terms of these four components: the innovation, the markets, the organization, and the cost and revenue. So you need a kind of a business model to think about how the innovation will be a success. So without a business model, the innovation is just the invention. It's a technology without thinking about what makes it a success. So business model connect the innovation to the organization, the market, and the costs and revenue of the innovation. And so those four factors, issues, things on the slide here are the main components of a business model. And in a moment, these will return when we talk about the business model canvas and how you can think about your innovation and how to organize your innovation in an organization. So we'll see these four again. What I think pretty interesting is that a business model in itself can be an innovation. So we talked about that there are several types of innovations, and one of those innovations is that you think about, okay, how can we organize our organization in such a way that it is that the organization itself is innovative, like a what we call a process innovation, and maybe even a paradigm or strategic innovation. And in the paper for today by Cavadias, he basically explains this. So he says, well, a business model is how you can derive value from what you do as an organization, but you can also be innovative in terms of the business model itself. And he, in that paper, he describes 6 different, well, he calls it 6 keys to successful innovation, but basically what it means is 6 types of 6 ways of innovative ways of doing business. And I think it was pretty interesting to think about this because and to discuss this because it kind of relates to many innovations we discussed before. Not all of them are that interesting to us communication information students, but many of them are. So for example, he calls a key business model in the current day industries personalization. Sorry, that's something I forgot to mention. So he says that if you want to be successful in this new economy, if you look at the ways that modern companies do their business and create a business model, you see that these 6 kind of define or characteristics of most of these successful companies. And he says the first one is personalization. And he says you see that many organizations now offer increasingly personalized products, and that there's an increasing demand in the market for personalization. So if you think about cars, for example, you used to be able to buy a car and do a couple of models, but nowadays if you want a car, you can pick from like millions of different layers and features of your cars, like the color, the tires, the interior, the 1001 features, etc. But you see this in all kinds of businesses. You can tailor your laptop with the components you want. You can tailor your clothing, like t-shirts that you can create yourself, etc. So personalization is like one trend that you see, that you increasingly see in business models nowadays. Now the second one is less interesting for us. He calls that closed loop, and he says that increasingly it's more important to be environmentally aware, to have like a closed loop business model. For example, Nespresso, and so they gather the cups that you use and they recycle them into new cups. They have a closed business model that they take into account like every aspect of the market. They're responsible for the cups that have been used, or responsible for the coffee that is grown. So they have tried to create a kind of closed loop in which they are involved in the entire loop that the product goes through. For us, that's less interesting because that's more a technical thing, I think, than a thing relating to innovation to discuss in this course. Okay. The third thing he mentions is asset sharing, like Airbnb, and he says increasingly you see that organizations try to share their assets. They try to share assets or parts of the organization, like your financial department or your production department. And he says organizations increasingly share those assets, or they try to get rid of those assets altogether, by outsourcing them. So for example, Apple doesn't even make their own Apple products, but they have outsourced that. More about that in a later lecture. But if you take this to the extreme, you have business models. So you have companies with a business model which relies on getting rid of their assets altogether. So if you look at Airbnb or Uber, Airbnb doesn't own hotels. Uber doesn't own taxis. They are, well, they don't call themselves differently, but they are a booking platform or and a taxi service, but they don't own it. So they have outsourced basically everything, and only thing they do is the platform, which kind of decreases responsibility. I'm not sure. NS share car. I think that's similar. Yes, I think that's a similar service as Uber. And of course, it's a good business model because it diminishes responsibility, and it reduces cost because you don't have any physical assets. And again, you see this more and more. There are more and more companies like NS Share Car as well, indeed, who say, well, we offer this service, but we actually don't own this service. Fourth one, usage-based pricing is that increasingly you see that you pay for what you use. It's now more and more common to also privately lease your car, for example. You can lease your coffee machine, you can lease your washing machine. You pay for what you use. So, for example, cloud computing, you pay for the amount of gigabytes you use up to a certain number of gigabytes. We as a university, for example, outsource the university's email partly to Google, and we pay per use. So that's a way of continuous revenue streams for organizations. Instead of simply buying a product or a feature or a service, it gives you revenue once, but this gives you revenue continuously. Second, the fifth one is collaborative ecosystem, like Android and app stores, which basically means that you have a kind of an ecosystem with multiple products in that together form a single platform. Think Android platform, the Apple App Store, in which you have like an ecosystem that kind of forces you into using that product and everything around that product to kind of have a lock-in, so that it is for you impossible or very difficult to change to a different ecosystem. And finally, I think that's also less relevant for us, but more for real business and management students, is that you see that organizations increasingly become less and less formal. So they become agile and adaptive because they decentralize, they outsource, they form coalitions with other organizations. It's less interesting for us, but we will spend some time with that when we talk about virtual organizations in lecture 9 or 10 or so. So again, I thought it was interesting because this kind of shows that there is not simply thinking about an innovation, which is a physical product, and then selling that, but you can also think about, okay, what are whole new ways of doing business itself? And I think this paper provides some interesting views. So, okay, we talked about what a business model is and the features of a business model. So a business model is the relation between innovation, the organization, the market, and the cost and revenue. We talked about some innovations in business models itself. And it's now time to spend a bunch of time to the business model canvas. So this is based on a very popular book by Oosterwal and Penieur, two Belgians, and they have created this business model canvas, it fulfills several functions. So it is used in courses like these to explain the different components of a business model. But it's also used a lot in practice. So if you have to think about, okay, I have a new product, or and you have to think about, okay, what do we need in order to make this product a success? You can use the business model canvas in order to kind of tick off everything you need to think about. If you look at this business model canvas and compare it to the business plan you have to write, you see that there are a lot of similarities between those as well. It's a bit different because I also need to pay attention to the whole scientific part of it, to other things I discussed during the course. But a lot of it is discussed during the business model canvas as well. So this is both like a learning tool, but also a very practical tool of thinking about innovations and how to make them a success. And it's also used like in brainstorming sessions, in which you have a group together and you force them to, come up with something innovative and work out why the innovation is a success in a kind of a pressure cooker session in which they have to come up with an idea in a very short amount of time. So the business model canvas consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different components. But it's maybe a bit much to remember all of them. That's why I relate them to the 4 components of the business model discussed before. Starting with the value proposition. The value proposition part of the business model explains, okay, what is the innovation and why is the innovation useful for customers? Why do people want to use this product? Why are people influenced by our smoking cessation campaign? Why do people want to adopt this service? Which is the value proposition. It relates to the innovation. And so the technology itself, if it's a technology or service or whatever, and the usefulness of that service. So the innovation part. Then we have the market part of the business model canvas. So the market part relates to everything related to the customer. How can we reach the customers? How will our customers like us? Through which channels will we reach our customers for marketing, but also for like shipping the product if it's a physical product? How do we define our customers? Do we have different types of customers, etc.? So that's everything market related. Then we have the cost and revenue part. So starting with revenue, how will we make money? How much will people pay for it? Is it a service that people pay monthly, or is it a one-time investment that people do? And what are the costs? So what does it cost us to make the innovation, to market, to produce, etc.? And then finally, the organization part. What do we need in our organization to make the innovation happen? Who are our key partners? If the innovation is a physical product, do we outsource it? Does another organization make it for us? Do we make it ourselves? What kind of assets do we need? What kind of work do the people need to do in our organization? Etc. So everything that you need in the organization to make the innovation happen. So in there you see the 4 components of the business model: innovation, market, cost and revenue, and organization. So, let's go through all of them. Starting, of course, with the innovation itself. So starting with the value proposition. It's time for me to take a sip of water. So the value proposition is the innovation in terms of value it delivers for the customer. So we discussed this last week as well, when we talked about diffusion of innovation, that maybe at first your innovation will be a success because people adopt it because they think it's cool. But you need to convince people of the use of the innovation, so the value it delivers, in order for it to be a success throughout the market. So the value proposition is the innovation in terms of value it delivers for the customer. So what needs does the innovation fulfill, or what problems does the innovation solve? If you took my communication theory course last year, this may sound familiar, because there we talked about an advertising strategy model in which they distinguished different types of products. And one type of products was, okay, I want products because it fulfills a need. And other types of products you want because it takes away a problem. You know, for example, laundry detergent, you don't really want a laundry detergent, but you need it because you have to get your laundry clean. While other things you want it because you think it's fun, like a holiday. So there we have it, the connection between the courses. So you can define the value of your innovation in terms of, okay, what needs does it fulfill, or what problems does it solve? And there are a lot of different types of needs of problems. So, for example, you can come up with a need that people don't even realize they have. Okay, do I really want to a robot that vacuum cleans my house? Well, if you would have asked like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, people would say, why on earth would I need a robot like that? But you see that the need is kind of created. People now start thinking, well, it would be kind of handy and useful, and why not? Well, and the same thing you saw with mobile phones, you know, like the movie we talked about last time. There's a famous movie from 1999 in which they asked a bunch of people, would you like a mobile phone? And like everyone said, no, I don't need a mobile phone. So if you have a good innovation, you can actually create new needs for people. But of course, you have to market the innovation in order to teach people that they have those needs. So an innovation can focus on new needs entirely. It can solve existing problems, you know, get the job done, and wash your clothes more quickly or cleaner than before, which also increasing performance of an existing product. This does your laundry 2 times better, whatever that means. Increased customization, a better design, so a more ease of use. You can try to create a kind of a status or identity by adopting a product. You know, think Apple phones. You can create an innovation which offers the same but for cheaper, especially interesting for business to business, because they are mostly about reducing costs. Or you can reduce risks with an innovation, you know, buy this insurance. And so these are not things that you have to study for the exam. These this subdivision in different types of needs. So you need to know what a value proposition is, but you know, you don't have to remember that you can focus on new needs or increase performance or whatever. So it's just about showing you that examples of what kind of needs or problems you can fulfill with an innovation. You know, you can solve an existing problem, you can offer the same thing cheaper, you can have better usability, and a bunch of other things you can have. So the value proposition is indeed the needs are it fulfilled. The problems does it solve, together with, okay, who are actually my customers? Sort of tailored to different customer segments. Because again, if you look at the people who will adopt your innovation early on, they may be, so the need that the innovation fulfills for them may be, for example, creating status or identity because of the innovation. While for other customer segments, so for the early majority or the late majority, the reason that they adopt the innovation, so the value it delivers, maybe a better design or better performance, and not necessarily an image. So in some of the needs that an innovation fulfills or the problem doesn't it solves is maybe different for different groups of customers. So the value proposition is basically the innovation in terms of the value it delivers for the customer. And it's important because it connects the innovation and the organization's wider strategy. What you want with a value proposition is to explain the innovation in terms of what you do as an organization. And if you have a good innovation for your organization, you should be able to explain the innovation so that it matches the entirety of your organization. And the entirety of your organization is the societal level, the industry level, the market level, and the firm level of the organization. So let me clarify that in the next slide. So starting with the societal level, that basically means that the innovation must fit within the wider societal developments that you see and that are relevant for your organization as a whole. So for example, you can have an innovation that will determine if your baby will be a boy or a girl, or if you can choose if it will be a boy or a girl. It's kind of related to genome testing, but that has all kinds of ethical and legal and political and societal consequences. And you have to make sure that your innovation, that your innovation does not run into these issues, and that your organization as a whole is suited to tackle these issues if needed. The light tool that you can use for this is the pestle analysis. I will discuss that next week when we talk about an organization strategy, because a pestle analysis is also a tool to determine an organization strategy as a whole. Hence the link between value proposition and organization strategy. So next week I'll talk a bit more about pestle analysis. Oh yeah. Same goes for the industry level, which basically means, okay, if we look at the innovation in our organization, what is happening outside of the organization that may be a risk or an opportunity for innovation. So it basically links your innovation to your wider strategy as an organization by looking at the competition. The tool that you use for that is usually Porter's 5 forces analysis, which we will also discuss next week, because it's also one of the most important ways to think about the strategy of your organization. At the market level, your value proposition should kind of determine who your customers will be. So who will be the early adopters, who will be the laggards, etc. And your value proposition should kind of determine or explain, okay, where is the innovation located? So at the market level, the value proposition kind of explains, okay, how will the innovation diffuse? How is it related to the technology innovation in general? What kind of innovation is it? And also to the cost and revenue itself, of course, because that is partly determined by the type of innovation and the technology curve. So at the market level, the value proposition kind of determines, okay, where is it located? So are we really, is the value really here, that we really aim at? Is it really a technology that is in its early stages and is there a huge opportunity for growth? Or are we like kind of here, and is the innovation a minor improvement, and is the value therefore relatively minor in terms of costs of revenue to generate? And then finally, at the firm level, the value proposition kind of links the internal organization to the to the my God. In terms of the firm level, the innovation, so the value proposition links the innovation to the rest of the organization. So how does the innovation fit within the whole of the organization? There are several tools to think about the value proposition at the firm level as well. We also discussed them in the coming weeks. So this basically means if you look at the business model canvas, the value proposition is basically the central core of the business model canvas. So there's a reason this one is in the center, because it links all the other aspects of the organization. So in the value proposition, you determine the innovation, but you also determine the links between the innovation and the markets and the customer revenue and the organization as a whole. So that you can have an idea of what the value of your innovation is and what the wider surroundings of the innovation are. I see no questions in the meantime, which is either a good sign or a very bad sign. So let me know if everything's clear. In a normal lecture, I could see from your faces, but I hope this is clear what the value proposition is. Thanks. Great to get some confirmation. Okay, then I will switch over to the market level. To the market part of the business model canvas. So let me go back one more time. So at the market level, you see that you think of a business model in terms of, okay, the customer relationship, the customer segments, and the channels. So we start with customer segments, because the most important thing you want to do when you have an innovation is think about who are my customers, and maybe you have different types of customers. So who are my first customers and who will be my later customers? So you define your customers or your different types or segments of customers in terms of the things that are relevant for your innovation. So are your customers people in a certain age group? Are your customers people in a sort of psychosocial? So do they have a certain personality or certain identity? Do they belong to a certain subgroup of people? Can you define them in terms of gratifications, needs, motivations? Are there people who go for ease of use? Are they people who go for the coolness of an innovation? Things like that. What's their skill level and expertise? Is our innovation aimed at everyone because there's only one button, or does it require certain expertise in order to be used? And of course, what is the customer's willingness to pay? So how financially sound are they, and how much are they willing to pay for the innovation? This does not need to be, so not all of these need to be defined all of the time, because it depends on your innovation, and also depending in your innovation, there may be other segmentations that you want to make that define your customers. So for example, one thing that is not in here, which is also very relevant, are our customers people or other organizations? So are we a business to consumer or business to business organization? Which is of course one of the first things you determine. And again, and also related, what type of market are you aiming for? Do you have a niche market with only a very specific smaller group of customers? Or are you a mass market in which potentially everyone could adopt a product? Are you segmented or diversified? Is your market like clearly, okay, this is my market, or do you have several sub-markets? So for example, if you are Apple, take it as an example again, Apple has different segments in their market. So they aim for either the people who are, who are designers, who edit video, are graphic designers, because they have traditionally always used Apple products. But they now also have a more of a mass audience to which they tailor the products, and they have different campaigns and different ways of attracting those separate groups. And finally, is the market one-sided or more-sided? That will become clear in a couple of other lectures as well. But basically, one-sided means that you have one type of customers. So I sell a product to a customer. But you also have more-sided markets. So for example, if you think of Google, and if you buy a Google app, Google earns revenue from me buying the app, but also from advertisers, people developing apps on the platform. So you can have that means that you basically have two types of customers. Similarly, if you build a platform like Facebook, Facebook customers are the advertisers foremost, and those are their main customers. And we are basically Facebook products, but we are also customers of Facebook, because we also need to be content, because we need to keep using Facebook and Instagram. So Facebook also has different types of customers they need to tailor to. So they have a more-sided type of market. So this is what you need to think about when determining who your customers will be. And of course, when you think about your innovation, you have to link the value proposition with your customers. So when we talked about the value proposition, we talked about why Facebook is more-sided. Well, simply because Facebook has widely different customer groups. Well, why don't you tell me, who are Facebook's customers? Not you, Jikke, specifically, but any of you listening. Parents? Are parents Facebook? Oh yeah, of course. We are no longer Facebook. Yeah. Well, parents, why not? Yeah, my mom's generation, absolutely. But let's stick parents under the let's call them consumers. Data-driven organizations, everyday users, companies for advertising. Is there a difference between customers and users? You don't have to buy Facebook. No, yeah, Facebook might be a bit of a bad example, but if you look at Facebook's customers, so basically the people who earn Facebook revenue, those are mainly advertising companies, of course, advertising companies or companies advertising on Facebook. So they are Facebook's main customers. So that's one segment. Another segment is data-driven companies. People buy Facebook's data for analysis. So not specifically for advertisement, but for analysis of what are people's needs, what are people's wants. So in order to inform other organizations about what course of action to take, so they are data-driven analytics organizations. So those are completely different groups of organizations that Facebook tailors to. And then, of course, there's us, or, well, not you, but me and people older than me, who use Facebook as users. So they're not customers in the original sense, because they don't pay for Facebook. Can you pay for Facebook if you want? I don't know. So they don't pay for Facebook, but they are customers, because if Facebook doesn't tailor to us or to your parents, they stop using Facebook, and Facebook, ceases to exist. So Facebook still, so even that they don't earn money directly from customers, from users like us, they're still an important group to market to. So, and that is why Facebook is more sided platform and a more silent organization as a whole. And that's also that, you know, the people adopting your innovation, it's not always like it's not always a for-profit goal. So it's also, users for Facebook are us, and they are also an important market group for Facebook. So you hear, you know, that you're not, so Facebook sells the data to advertisers, so you are the product, not the user, but that's not entirely true, because without us, Facebook would not exist. So we are a target group as well. Well, we are parents, but you as well, but because you use WhatsApp and you use Instagram, which is also Facebook. I think that clears it up. So let me do this slide and then we go for a break. So where was I? Yeah, I said that we talked about the value proposition, and the value proposition you say, okay, what needs does the innovation solve? Sorry, what need does it fulfill, or what problem does it solve? You have to, so in the business model canvas, they say, but there of course is true, you have to link the value proposition to your customer profiles. So basically your value proposition is, okay, what does the innovation do exactly? Well, it's a vacuum cleaner that automatically cleans your room without you using it. So it's a robot vacuum cleaner. What needs does it solve? Well, it may solve the need for vacuum cleaning, but okay, it's more of a pain reliever because it vacuum cleans without me. So it gives me some more time. So that's my value proposition. And then you have to tie that to your customer profile. Okay, who would benefit from that? So what kind of gains would people get from a robot vacuum cleaner? Oh, well, okay, they may have more time for other things, or they may show the vacuum cleaner to other people and to state how cool they are. And who are our customers? Well, probably people who are quite busy, people who love new technology, at least now. So those are the type of people who will likely adopt a robot vacuum cleaner now. So in this way, you can link your value proposition to your customer profile. It says here rather abstract, but to be honest, I don't know why that's on the slide. So forget that. Because it's pretty obvious to me that you link what the innovation can do to the types of customers you have. So I don't remember why I put it on the slide. It's not in the notes as well. So sorry about that, but this is, I think this is pretty obvious. So let's go for a break for 10 minutes. So let's continue at 5:45, and then we talk more about the business model canvas, which is the second part of the market part. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. So before the break, we talked about that that the second part is business model canvas, the market part. So we talked about customer segments, who exactly are your customers for different parts of the innovation curve, and also maybe different types of customers that you have. Anyways, the market is also your customer relationships. So how to acquire and retain customers, which basically relates to customer relationship management. So of course, in this course, it is not a marketing course. So we do not talk about, advertising strategies and so in terms of acquiring customers. But we will talk a bit about how you as an organization can keep track of who your customers are, and what the strategies are for retaining your customers using technology. So larger companies use customer relationship management systems to keep track of their customers. Sorry. And we will deal with that in lecture 8. And the final part of the market part of the customer business model canvas is the channels. So this also relates to marketing and sales. So I will not devote too much time to this, because this is you'll learn this in other courses as well, or have learned this already. The channels that you use to market your product and to sell your product relate to marketing, sales, and after sales. So simply the basic market model from awareness until after sales is like the basic, or kind of determine the basic channels that you use. So what kind of advertising or marketing strategy do you have to raise awareness of your innovation, and to learn people what the innovation does, so that people can evaluate the innovation. What kind of channels do you have for purchase? Do you have your own stores, etc., or do you sell only online? Those kind of things. Delivery of your product. So how is your product delivered? So is it a service? So is it like an online thing? Is it a physical product? How is it shipped? Those kinds of issues. And what happens after sales, so your customer service. So what kind of sales you have? So related to the purchase part of the channels. Are you, if you're a bakery in a village, then it is simple. So you have your own store and you sell your product in your own store, period. But it may be more complicated. So you can sell your product in your own stores, but you can also have partner stores. So for example, a clothing brand, take Nikki. Nikki sells her clothes in her fashion in their own dedicated stores, but Nikki is also available in a lot of different partner stores. And also like the distinction between online and offline. So do you have your own stores and do you also sell online? And if you sell online, do you sell from your own site or do you use partner sites? So for example, do you sell through bol.com or amazon.com? One moment. Still have stripes. So you have to think about that as well in your business model. How do we, through what channels do we reach our customers? Through which channels do we sell our product or innovation? Online, offline, own channels, other channels. And how is that different again for different customer segments? So for example, if you want to reach the early majority, late majority, it's usually through mass media campaigns. If you want to use reach the innovators, maybe the early adopters as well, you need to organize, special events in order to attract those innovators. So these are just examples, but you can imagine that you need kind of different channels and different strategies to reach different types of customers. So this is everything that relates to the market part of your innovation. And then we continue to the we continue to the organization part of the business model compass. Because, well, nice, okay, you have an innovation and you have an idea how your innovation will be a success, who your customers are, but now you have to, you probably did it before, but you also have to think about your internal organization. So you have to think about your key resources. So what resources does your innovation require? If it's a physical product, do you need some kind of raw materials that you need to kind of put together or so in order to make the innovation? So, and do you need machines for that? How much do you need financial capital? If your organization is a process or a service, but also if it's a product, you need people and you need certain knowledge or people with certain knowledge in your organization in order to be able to create and make and produce the innovation. And you need information technology in order to make sure that everything is streamlined in your organization. So you need a lot of resources as well in your organization. These key resources relate to the key processes and the key activities in your organization. Okay, we now have people and materials, etc. in our organization. Now what? What are we going to do with that? So you have your strategy of your organization. You have an idea about who does what in an organization. You have different departments. You have your structure and culture of your organization, how you organize all that in order to support the innovation. And this is basically what we are going to do in the second part of the course. So in the coming 4 or 5 lectures, we're going to talk about the organization strategy, about the organization and the people, about structure and culture of the organization. We're going to do that in the next 3 lectures. And of course, you need to think about, okay, who are my key partners in the organization? Who are my suppliers? Do I outsource certain parts of my organization? So do we have a joint venture in which you create a new innovation together with another organization, well, etc. And you want to do that, you want to think about that because, of course, you want to reduce risk. If you can work together with another organization, it reduces risk. It can be more efficient to outsource part of your organization. So you can acquire resources that you don't have in-house. So, for example, you can hire external consultants who help you with certain aspects of your innovation. But of course, it has risks. If you tell other organizations about what you're planning to do, they can steal your idea. So you basically have to think very strategically about, okay, who do we involve in a new business or service or product we develop. For a group question, first, what do we need to fill in the business model canvas? Well, the best advice I can give you is to look at the assignment instructions, because there is kind of given what you need to present in the first presentation. So you fill in, so the assignment and the final business plan is not exactly the same as the business model canvas, but it has similar components. So for the first presentation, you basically, if you link that to the parts of the business model canvas, you work out the innovation part and the market part. And I think also the cost and revenue part. And in the second part of the, so in the second presentation, it's you work out the whole organization part. So there you work out everything that surrounds the innovation. So how do you need to arrange your organization in order to make sure that the innovation happens and is a success? And that's what we will be discussing in the coming 4 or 5 lectures. 8 minutes for the presentation, though we have maybe like a 2-minute leeway if you are quick in setting up your presentation. So then it may take 10 minutes, but keep around 8 minutes because many people will still take longer for the presentation. We have 6 presentations in a 2-hour, well, not even a 2-hour time slot, which means we can have like at most 15 minutes per presentation. And that is 1.5 hours, and then we have some time for a break. So try to keep it under 10 minutes, so then I can also give you feedback on the presentation. Okay. So basically the whole organization part of the business model canvas. So how is your innovation related to your organization is the topic of the coming 5 lectures. The whole group to present or only one person? That's something you can decide for yourself. The presentation is just there. It's just there. Presentation. One of the main goals of the presentation is to give you feedback on your progress. So if most of you have done separate things, then it may be wise that more than one person presents does the presentation, but it's also fine if one person presents it. In general, when you have to present in groups, I would say that there are only 1 or 2 people who present, because well, that's something I call the click, quack, and quack effect, or what's in English, the Huey, Dewey, Louie effect. Because if you have too many people presenting, it's like people finishing each other's sentences. You know, one person having a 1 minute presentation, and after 1 minute the other taking over, and the third taking over, and the first one again. You don't want to have that in presentations in general, and that's a tip for all presentations you have to give. Welcome. And don't worry too much about the presentation. No, it's not for a grade. It's just to give you feedback on your business plan. So in summary, what you need to do to support the innovation in your organization is that you need to know, okay, does the innovation fit in the overall strategy of the organization? Does the innovation fit into the structure and culture of your organization? You have to explain to the people in your organization that you have a new technology or a new whatever that you want to develop. You need to take care of the information technology in your organization, and of course of the marketing. And it's no coincidence that exactly these 4 things, except marketing, because there are other courses for that, but these 4 things, strategy, structure, culture, people, and IT, are the topics of the next lecture. Because what we basically did up to now, so in the first 4 lectures, what we talked about innovation and what is an innovation, types of innovation, diffusion of innovation, etc. After this lecture, we will switch from innovation to a more of an organizational and technology perspective. And then we talk about the relation between innovation and technology and the organization itself. Okie dokie. So finally, we have the cost and revenue part of the organization, of the business model canvas. So in order to make an innovation a success, you have to think about the cost and revenue. So starting with cost. So you have to make an assessment of the costs involved in the innovation. And it's not only, okay, I have developed a new pencil and the pencil will cost 50 cents to make per pencil. So that's not the only cost you have. So it's based on basically all the organizational building blocks. Okay, it's based on do we need new products? Do we need new machines? Do we need new raw materials? Do we need new people to make the pencil? How do we market it? What does it cost to market the pencil? Etc. So the cost structure of the innovation. In general, you have initial costs before launch, developing the innovation, getting your organization ready for the innovation, versus costs after launch, which means continuing producing the innovation or delivering the service. You have fixed versus variable costs, and for certain products you have really high fixed costs, but few variable costs, and for other products it's the other way around. So for example, in the gaming industry, and also in the movie industry, the fixed costs are sky high. It costs millions, and sometimes maybe even $1 billion to develop a video game. But once you have developed a video game, the upkeep, so the variable costs are really, really, really low. And in other industries, for example, consultancy, if you hire or rent out consultants, then you have to pay all those consultants. So the variable costs of keeping them employed are very high, but there are very little fixed costs that you have. And of course, you can think about your organization in terms of cost versus value driven. We'll talk more about that in the next lecture when we talk about strategies. But some organizations are really fixated on the cost, so they want to keep the cost structure as low as possible. Think little. While other organizations are less concerned about the costs. So of course, they are concerned about the cost, but less concerned, and they are more concerned about the revenue streams. So they want to deliver something that brings in more money. So your cost structure is basically thinking about, okay, what will my costs be and what will the entire cost of the innovation be, not only producing, but everything else. Then the revenue streams is everything that the revenues will derive from the innovation. So an assessment of the willingness to pay. So what are people willing to pay for the innovation to determine pricing, and setting up a revenue model. So basically, how will I earn money? Will people, simply pay for my product and that's it? Or will people pay on a subscription basis? And that there are many different types of revenue models, and after I'm done with the business model canvas, I will explain different revenue models, or different ways that you can make money with a product or innovation. And of course, revenue is not only thinking about revenue, but also thinking about growth. Okay, we have revenue now from a certain group of customers, but maybe we can tailor the innovation so that we can attract another group of customers, so that we can grow. Maybe we have revenue now, but maybe if we improve the product, have an Apple iPhone 13 or whatever, we can get people so far as to buy a new phone, while their old phone is still perfectly fine. So revenue is not only focusing on revenue now, but also thinking about revenue in the future. So growth. So before we turn to the different revenue models that there are, let me first explain a bit about the growth model. So a growth model is, I think I already explained it, so it's thinking about what else you can do to generate revenue. So increasing your customer base, so targeting different groups of customers, additional sales, upgrades, replacements, planned obsolescence, subscription models, etc. Upgrades, buy a new phone. So upgrades to a phone, so buy an extension. Replacements, buy a new phone. Planned obsolescence means that organizations think about when a product should stop working, so that you are forced to buy a new one. I think we all know the examples of iPhones, of mobile phones, who that get slower and slower and slower as time increases, and at a certain point in time, Samsung or Apple says, well, if you want to continue using your phone, you can no longer upgrade to a new version of the software, and then you have all kinds of security risks. Well, that's planned obsolescence. Your phone is perfectly fine, but they actually kind of force you with software or lack of software to adopt a new phone. It's planned obsolescence, which is very bad for the environment and for all kinds of other reasons. And you see that in more many different types of products as well. So, for example, Primark, it was in the news, I think, yesterday or the day before yesterday, that Primark now has a new kind of business model. So they want to focus more on the environment, and now, so they used to make clothes which would actually basically turn to dust after you wash them 5 times. So it was really in their business model that their clothes should be of such quality that they could only be washed like 5 times before they basically disintegrate. And now they say we are going to make it so that our clothes are washable 30 times instead of 5. And that's also planned obsolescence. But there are, I guess, a zillion examples of companies on purpose making their products bad or worse than they could, so to force you to buy replacements. Where was I? Well, I got a bit carried away. But a growth model is thinking about what can we do additionally to get revenue, upgrades, replacements, subscription models, We can reduce costs. We can think that we can keep an eye on what the competition does, because if the competition starts copying us, we can have negative growth because people turn to another product from a competitor. So basically, you have to think about, okay, how can we increase profits? Is revenue by minus decreasing costs. Okay. So I think this is finally, so maybe you're done a bit early. So there are many different revenue models. So there are many different ways of making money with an innovation. And I think these are could be very interesting for your business plans as well. So first of all, there are many ways of making money or many ways of earning revenue with an innovation, and not all of them are listed here. And these are also not exclusive. So if you sell by direct sales, you can also sell via leasing. So they're not exclusive, but they are ways of thinking about, okay, thinking in general, how do organizations actually make money with certain products or services or innovations in general. So these are not exhaustive, but good examples. So how can you generate revenue in today's economy? So there are a number based on the literature for this week. First of all, of course, you have direct sales, which is basically directly selling your product. You can do that in your own store or in other people's stores. You can do that on your own website or on partner websites. Think basically every product that you buy from Albert Heijn, if you order products from Amazon.com, if you go to an Apple store or a clothing or a fashion store. That is direct sales. You go somewhere online or offline, you buy something. Sounds obvious, but this is one of the most obvious ways indeed to generate revenue. The simplest way. Usage fees. You can generate revenue via usage fees. So with Felix, you pay as you go. Pay depending on the amount you go. You pay per day that you stay in a hotel. If you use Amazon Web Services, you pay for the amount of computer time you use. So maybe interesting to tell that Amazon also earns a lot of money by hiring out the computing facilities they have. So for example, if you want to do a task which requires a lot of computing power, you can use Amazon Web Services and you pay for the amount of computing power you use. So basically usage-based fees. So the longer or the more you use it, the more you pay. Subscription fees basically means that you buy something and get things delivered or can keep using it with regular intervals. So think mobile phone subscription, think Bluemon. So you can have a subscription to Bluemon, and first time they send you a vase with flowers, and then every 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever you want, they send you a new bunch of flowers. So you have a subscription to Bluemon. So that's you have a subscription for Bluemon, you have a subscription for HelloFresh or whatever. So that's obvious subscription, but also think of razor blades. So that's basically also a subscription model for printers, because you have a subscription on the razor blades. So you invest in a razor, which they offer relatively cheap. But then if you want to buy razor blades, they're really expensive and they only last a certain amount of time. So you have to keep buying new razor blades. So basically, it's a kind of a subscription. It's also a subscription fee, but then without an official subscription. Printers are the same. Printers are sold for under the cost price because they earn money with the ink. Yeah, like I said, they're not really always mutually exclusive, but usage fees is basically more like continuous. Like, so the more you use something, the more you pay. So with every kilometer you drive with Felix, the more you pay, for example. I think public transport as well. While a subscription like a gym is more is more a subscription model, because you don't pay per use, but you pay at regular intervals. A gym is more a subscription fee. But the difference is not clear cut, because you could also say, well, these razor blades are used fees, because the more you use a razor blade, the faster it deteriorates, and the more often you need to buy new ones. But you get the idea. That you either pay for something continuously, or you have a regular subscription. I think gas would be a usage fee. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it depends. It's really like the mileage. Good example. Then you have lease. Leasing, of course, is also a subscription fee, but leasing usually offers other things as well. So you don't. So leasing a car does not mean that you get a car every month or so, or every few years. Well, it does mean that you get a car every few years, but it also means that they take care of everything else. APK. I don't remember about APK. So make sure that the car is in good shape, garage, sometimes also insurance. I think everything is handled by leasing. So it's kind of a subscription model, but then with extras, and therefore usually services included. Yeah. My God, my English is terrible today. Well, not only today, but especially terrible today. Sorry. I've been away for the weekend, so I've been with my family, and we've been to France for from Thursday to Sunday for wine tasting. So I took my mother and my uncle and aunt and my niece to a gîte, an apartment in France, and then we spent the day eating and drinking and buying wine. And we returned yesterday at the end of the day, and then I had to teach this morning at 8:45. Yeah, so indeed, it's a great excuse. So it was a long weekend, but it was a fun weekend. I think my mother and uncle and aunt were especially happy. Yeah, so that's also important. Yes. So that's why I'm maybe a bit less focused than I usually am. I think these are the kinds of jokes you hear when it's 6:15 on a Monday. Okay. Let's continue. Yeah, I also have a private life. Yeah, sometimes. Thanks. Okay, let's continue. Another way to make money is licensing. Is by selling the things you own to other companies so that they can use it. So, for example, well, the best example of licensing is franchising. If you want to own a McDonald's restaurant, you can. So. And I think most, at least in the Netherlands, most McDonald's restaurants are actually private restaurants, like private companies, but they are franchised by McDonald's. So those restaurants are private companies, but they, buy a lot of stuff. So they buy their ingredients, they buy their logos, the clothing for the personnel, they buy everything from McDonald's. But they are their own business. So that's a basic franchising model. And that's also a way, of course, that McDonald's makes money without risks, because those people are responsible for their own revenue and they can go bankrupt, and it doesn't affect McDonald's at all. So franchising is a good way of making money as well. And of course, you see that in supermarkets as well. Supermarkets are often franchised as well. So a lot of Albert Heijn's or supermarkets are franchised. So people, they, for example, my Albert Heijn here is its own company, its own BV in the Dutch system, but they are franchised by Albert Heijn. And I think fun examples of how the franchising works is, for example, if you look at computer games like FIFA. So FIFA franchises the right to use the images of the football players. And that's a way that FIFA earns a lot of money, because they franchise, they give away, they license the rights they have. Also, other examples are virtual goods. So you can, of course, buy. So if you play, any game nowadays on your mobile phone, they rely on virtual goods that you can buy, like upgrades to computer games. Skins you can buy in computer games, in those terrible games that your parents play on Facebook. You can buy coins, you can skip a level, etc. So those kinds of things. So virtual goods. It's quite interesting because you nowadays see that people try to see, because virtual goods, they don't really exist, so they have no inherent value. So people try to make virtual goods more rare or more unique, in order for them to have more intrinsic value. And that is, I think, an interesting development of these, what they call non-fungible tokens, those NFT things, in which you can buy a virtual good, a virtual something that is actually unique. So I think Facebook, YouTube sold a video, was it YouTube? I think so. Sold a video that is now not available on YouTube anymore. And there is someone who has the unique rights to watching that video. And Bitcoins are an example of virtual goods as well. And Bitcoins are intrinsically related to those, well, not Bitcoin, but the technology that Bitcoin is based upon, blockchain, is intrinsically related to those non-fungible tokens, because they also rely on a blockchain to keep track of who owns which token. It maybe would be fun to have a I don't know, if it kind of drifts away a bit from communication and information science, but I think it might be fun to talk a bit more about how blockchains and bitcoins work. I don't know if I have time for that in this lecture, not in this lecture, but now. But it may be interesting to see if we can fit that into another course. Yeah, sorry about that. So virtual goods are an example of revenue as well. Another revenue model is really related to virtual goods, is like freemium. You see nowadays that you can start using something for free, and then if you want to continue use it, too bad, you have to pay. Tinder is free, but if you want to have more success with Tinder, then you should definitely pay for Tinder. Dropbox is free, but if you want to store more documents in Dropbox, then you need to pay. Same as Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, etc. Those types of models. Well, they of course are virtual goods. They are also subscription models, but they are also freemium models. So they are more than one revenue model, of course. But I think you see nowadays that many things are offered for free, but then you have to pay. So it's kind of an interesting revenue model that you see nowadays. It's like the when you would go to the butcher or the cheese shop with your parents when you were little, and you would get a slice of cheese, and then if you like that, you would pay for the whole cheese. That's kind of a freemium model as well. Well, nearly there. Let's skip a bit to the other examples of revenue streams. Okay, you have the middleman. You see that a lot of organizations, yeah, Spotify as well. Yeah, absolutely. Spotify is a good example of a freemium model as well. You have the middleman, organizations who kind of sit in the middle, so they don't if you remember when we started the lecture and we talked about different business model, these are companies that actually don't own anything, but they're just in the middle between another organization and a customer. So think Booking.com, PayPal, Uber, Thuisbezorgd, Airbnb. They don't actually have any assets, but they are the middleman between two other organizations. So that's another revenue model and a really low risk model, because you are not responsible for the restaurants or the hotels. And this kind of relates to on-demand, which is, so basically you have three models which are pretty similar. So the middleman in between organizations and the customers, on demand, delivering products as you need them. Think gorillas, but also think, but Just Eat. Thuisbezorgd is basically also an on-demand organization. And the marketplace organizations who connect different consumers to each other are also kind of similar, but also different enough for each to warrant their own slide. So the middleman is an organization in between, earning revenue because they're in between other organizations and consumers, and therefore they earn a bit of the revenue that those organizations would otherwise have. On demand is that you earn money by being able to respond quickly to customer needs. So think gorillas or Flink or whatever. And the marketplace is basically the middleman, but then connecting consumers only. So being a broker, being a middleman between consumers and other consumers. So think eBay, think also Airbnb, think Etsy, those kind of ways. So these are, I think, interesting examples of ways to generate revenue for your organization. And these may be interesting to think about when you develop your business plan and when you develop your innovation. Finally, and then I quit. The business model I just discussed revenue models are all revenue models which you generate money directly from customers. But you can also think of other ways to earn money that are not related to simply you selling something or that are non-customer related. Difference between on-demand and middleman. But like I said, they're really related, and most of the time, well, a middleman is also on demand, but not always, and vice versa. So a middleman is an organization in the middle between organizations and customers, between other organizations and customers. So, when you book something via Booking.com, Booking.com gets a part of the revenue from the hotel you book. I think that's pretty clear. Similar to Thuisbezorgd, every time you order something via Thuisbezorgd, Just Eat, Just Eat takes away a bit of revenue from the restaurant. So that's clear. Okay. Then we have on demand. Deliveroo and Just Eat Takeaway is also an on-demand service, of course, because they deliver on demand. But if you think about, for example, Gorillas, which offers on-demand delivery of groceries, like within 15 minutes, so they're really on demand, but they're not a middleman. So they're not in between other organizations and the consumers. So on demand is similar, but not entirely similar. Airbnb is a middleman as well. I just wanted to give different examples. So Airbnb can be both. So Airbnb can be both, is both a middleman, so they're in between more official organizations that also rent out apartments and between the consumers. But they're also a marketplace, because you as a consumer, I can rent out my bedroom via Airbnb to someone else. So as a consumer, similar to eBay, I can sell things I have as a consumer to other consumers. So, and that's a middleman. So, that's a marketplace. So a middleman is in between organizations and consumers, and a marketplace is in between consumers and other consumers. So Airbnb is both. Vinted is really an example of a Vinted is really an example of a marketplace because they are in between consumers and other consumers. And at this moment, the doorbell rings for my on-demand service because Picnic is now delivering. Well, finally, then we quit. You know what I said. So these were all examples of business models in which you actually generate revenue from the consumers that buy the product or service. But you can also think of other types of generating revenue. So, for example, advertising. You know, every television program you watch, well, not everything, but most of them earn money by advertising. And you have different types of advertising, you know, banners on website, affiliate marketing, in-item promotion, you know, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, things like that. You can generate revenue by selling the data that you have. Think Facebook, you know, location-based data, user data, browsing data, travel data, and you can earn money with that. And you can also earn money with investments. You know, many innovative companies, they only exist in order to convince some kind of bank or hedge fund to invest in them. And then they hope they are sold to a bigger company, that they can sell themselves to a bigger company. You know, and that's how they, you know, how they profit. So that's an investment-based revenue model. But again, these are only examples, but realize that there are many other ways of generating revenue besides you simply selling stuff to customers. So that's it for this week. We discussed what a business model is, and we discussed the whole business model canvas, which we distinguished in those 4 different main segments. So I hope it was interesting. And next week, we are going to shift to the organization part of the course and talk about the organization strategy. And next week, we have the work group sessions. So for now, thank you very much. And I will see you next week and next week in some work group sessions. Thanks very much.